So Elvis, the newest Hollywood musical biopic, came out this past week, and being honest, for a long time I wasn't too interested in it, but I saw it and I kind of loved it. I feel like despite just watching this movie, I've had quite a complicated relationship with it for a while. As I mentioned, for a long time I just didn't feel too interested in the film, and the biggest reason for that, despite being a fan of some of the people working on the movie, was the first trailer. Not that it necessarily has anything to do with the content of the film itself, but that trailer was bad. It was poorly edited, very basic, and ironically, just like the movie, it was long. I remember sitting down, watching the trailer, and thinking, I'll watch this movie when it comes out, but I know it'll be bad. However, now after watching the film, I can confidently say I was wrong. By no means is this the greatest film I've ever seen, but it's enjoyable, it's accurate, and more than anything, it's itself. Despite the rough trailer, the one thing that kept me somewhat excited for this film throughout the months before its release was its director, Baz Luhrmann. Even though I haven't watched through Luhrmann's entire filmography and didn't particularly love everything that I have seen, Luhrmann's unique style made me at the very least intrigued about this movie. This film, as the poster suggests, is a Baz Luhrmann film. Nothing more and definitely nothing less. Luhrmann's style is felt stronger than ever in here, and it's felt right away. Immediately, and I mean as soon as the movie starts, you can tell that this is a Baz Luhrmann movie. The crazy editing with constant cuts and zooms, the outgoing and colorful visuals, the camera movements, never able to focus on a specific thing for more than like 2 seconds. Yeah, this is definitely a Baz Luhrmann film, and to be honest, after seeing the film, I couldn't imagine the story being told in any other way. I've seen people talk about how they felt that the style wears off after a period of time, however for me it never really got boring, despite the movie's very long runtime. The style somehow stayed fresh throughout the film, likely due to the fact, at least for me, that after the insane beginning, the style was slightly toned down as it went forward. It was definitely there and definitely noticeable, but it never felt too in your face, you know? It never felt like it was just being weird and crazy just for the sake of being weird and crazy. It was doing that to benefit the story, and I feel like Luhrmann is one of the only people able to do something like that. Before I go on and talk about everything else this movie did right and wrong, I think I have to talk about the thing that pretty much everyone else has already talked about, and that's Austin Butler. You've probably heard it a million times already, but yes, Butler is seriously amazing in this. And I mean amazing. I couldn't call myself a fan of Austin Butler going into watching this. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily have said I disliked him, but I also wouldn't have said that I really liked him that much. I was hesitant to say whether I would like Butler or not in this film, but after watching the movie, it really isn't even a question anymore. Butler isn't just acting as Elvis, he quite seriously becomes Elvis. Everything from the singing, the dancing, the movements, the voice, the look, he embodies Elvis in a way that absolutely nobody else could have, and was undoubtedly the only perfect choice to play the icon that is Elvis in a film about his life. Tom Hanks, on the other hand, what happened there? I don't hate the idea of focusing on Colonel Tom Parker because he's a pretty interesting dude, and the way they told the story from his point of view is also quite interesting. He's a guy about to die, recounting his life with a legendary title character, and detailing how he quote-unquote made him. It's an interesting way to tell the story, especially considering how important the Colonel was to Elvis's life, and that's pretty much the only positive I can say about his character. The accent Tom Hanks is doing for the whole film is so unnatural and weird and never fully feels normal. The prosthetics never really look right, the performance is strange, it all just comes off as unusual at the end. When the movie kicks off and instead of seeing Elvis Presley you see Tom Parker, you kind of realize, I guess this isn't really as much about Elvis as the title suggests. And like I said, that's not really my problem. My problem is just how strange Tom Hanks' performance is in this movie. The best part of the film, in my eyes, other than Austin Butler's stunning performance, is every time Elvis performs. Baz Luhrmann does such a great job of directing this in a way that makes Elvis feel extraordinary and genuinely larger than life every time he's on stage, just like he was in reality. The way it focuses on Elvis, his singing, and definitely his movements, but also the way it focuses on the people watching, all his fans, and all the people that love him. My eyes were stuck to the screen for a lot of the film, but for these scenes in particularly, I seriously couldn't even look away. The magicness of Austin Butler's performance completely hypnotized me, my eyes were glued to the screen. It almost felt as if I was there in real life. As I mentioned, Butler's performance obviously helps out a ton. He completely sells it with his performance in the scenes as he does with everything else. He nails the movements and the dances. When he sings early on in the movie or when his voice is blended with the actual Elvis' voice later on, it sounds great. I knew about the voice blending thing going into the movie and I was slightly doubting how well it would sound, but to be honest, I couldn't really tell at all. Overall, this movie sounds really good. I've already touched on the way Elvis performs, but everything from the characters just simply speaking to each other, to the music, whether it be the main focus or in the background, it all sounded really good. Speaking of the musical aspects of the film, and I mean the ones that weren't sung or performed by Elvis/Austin Butler, I mean the ones by more modern popular artists that they kind of threw in there, despite this movie obviously not taking place in modern times and long before these artists were around. There was a Doja Cat song which I had already heard before I saw the movie. There's also an Eminem and CeeLo Green one, a Sway Lee song, and a Denzel Curry song, among others. And going in, I didn't think it would work in any way, and I was kind of right, but also kind of not. The fact that these types of songs were in the movie was definitely weird and never fully felt right. However, when they were thrown in, they kind of just put them in the background, sometimes even having different music playing briefly at the same time, other times having Elvis or someone else doing something important on the screen which demanded the viewer's attention. Basically what I'm saying is, the music was never in the front seat, it was just in the back seat, and the way it makes you focus on the movie rather than the 2022 song playing in the background is pretty cool. Like, there could be people watching this movie not realizing that they were literally listening to a Doja Cat song while watching Elvis run around on screen. The one thing people have been hating on this movie about the most, maybe other than whatever Tom Hanks was doing in here, was the length. This movie is just about 2 hours and 40 minutes long. I don't know if you could tell, but that is a long movie. This definitely isn't the longest movie I've ever seen, but it kind of feels like it. This film is so insanely fast-paced. As I mentioned before, it never feels like it hangs onto a single specific shot. It's always changing, zooming, cutting, jumping to something else, and I completely understand why the average moviegoer might dislike that, even though I was not among that crowd. The insane fast pacing of it all made it feel like it was happening very quickly in the moment, but when you mix that with a long runtime, it made it feel like the longest movie of all time. With that said, being honest, I didn't mind the runtime too much. Sitting in the theater, I definitely felt its length, but I can't say it was ever that boring. I mean, I was still interested in whatever was going on throughout the movie. However, if it was any longer, I think that's where problems would have started to arise with me. I mean, if there were even as much as 15 more minutes in this film, that's when I probably would have started to get bored, and once again, I definitely understand how viewers would have got bored, even without those bonus 15 minutes. But for me, it just kind of worked just well enough. I know I've spoken about some negatives, but to be honest, I definitely wouldn't be opposed to watching this again, and I absolutely recommend everybody to see this, even though I understand that this is a very hit or miss movie. I really liked it, I know other people who really liked it, but I also know people that didn't like it, and like I mentioned, I understand why a lot of people wouldn't like it. I definitely recommend it, but I also recommend to go in with an open mind and don't expect anything great. That's how I went into the film, and personally I did think it was pretty great, but I understand that there is quite a bit in here to dislike. Overall, this film kept me completely captivated and almost mesmerized throughout its entirety. Despite its very long runtime, it was hard to ever find a reason to take my eyes off the screen. The fast pacing with a long runtime might come off as a bit silly and annoying for some, and the same can be said about Tom Hanks' character. However, Austin Butler steals the show, and along with the help of Baz Luhrmann, helps make this a movie definitely worth checking out.